The famous one-shot take film 1917, shot by everyone's favorite cinematographer Roger Deakins, was shot almost entirely on a single ARRI Signature Prime 40mm lens, with a couple of shots done on the 35mm lens, only when a slightly wider field of view was absolutely necessary. But Roger stated that 99% of the film was shot on just that 40mm lens. So by nature of a film being all one seamless long take, it all has to basically be on the same focal length, even when you're stitching shots together to make them look seamless. They all have to be basically on the same focal length. And so when you're choosing a whole film to be on one focal length in combination with the Alexa Mini LF's full frame sized sensor, or near full frame sized sensor, the reason Roger chose a 40mm was to get the kind of shallow depth of field that is similar to a 50mm lens, but you get the slightly more intimate, wider field of view while still being in a medium shot that is more similar to a 35mm lens. However, you don't get as much of the distortion that you would have in a 35mm lens when you're shooting on a 40. And when you're shooting an action movie that takes place in World War II in the battlegrounds, the environment is just as important as the characters. But the characters still have to be an integral part of the way you compose each frame. If you shot the whole movie on a 50mm, for instance, a lot of the background, a lot of the environments would be lost. So long story short, it's just the perfect middle ground between a 35 and a 50. And as many of you street photographers out there know, myself included, the 35 and the 50 are the two most highly debated prime focal lengths of which one is better for street photography. You usually have street photographers in either the 35 camp or the 50 camp. And usually it's because you get street photographers who are more interested in capturing the subjects, the people, and they don't care as much about the environment, versus street photographers who care more about the environment, and that's why they shoot on 35. And they photograph people maybe in those environments, but the people are almost part of the environment instead of being separated from the environment. There's a term that one of my photography professors talked about a lot, which was the idea of an environmental portrait. And for me, the way that I view the world, the types of street photography pictures that I like to take, the 40mm is just the perfect middle ground. When I take photographs of people, I want the photograph to be about the person, but the person as they exist in that environment, not to be devoid or detached from the environment. And maybe force you to close in on a subject a little closer than you would with a 50, or for instance, a more telephoto lens like an 80 or a 135, where you can allow yourself the comfort of being further away from the subject, maybe photographing a person who doesn't even notice you're taking a picture of them while still getting a tight shot. But what those kinds of lenses do is artistically, it kind of makes you feel further away from the subject. So you can create beautiful portraits that way, but to me anyway, I read those photos as a little bit less intimate. The other interesting thing about a 40mm lens to me is that it's just wide enough where if you're just taking pictures of an environment or buildings or landscapes, for instance, sure, you can't get as wide as a 35. You can't get as wide as anywhere near a 16, for instance, if you're really doing vast landscapes of mountains and skylines and what have you. But you can find creative ways to capture those same landscapes with more unique perspectives, maybe throwing things in the foreground out of focus, maybe layering a shot with foreground, middle ground, and background to create more interesting compositions. And with a 40mm, you can create a sense of the space without showing the entire space, which is kind of an interesting challenge in and of itself, and can create some really captivating, interesting, evocative photos that way. And so yes, the tighter field of view of a 40 in comparison to a 35 or something wider, it is a creative restriction, but that creative restriction, those limits, can often help you be more creative and come up with ideas that you wouldn't have thought of, and still capture environments that you're wanting to capture, but in different ways. Now, if you're someone who likes using a wider focal length lens, you might just be thinking right now, why not do something like the Leica Q3 does, or the Leica Q2, which is a 28mm lens fixed focal length. You can't swap it out, but it's a 60 megapixel camera and it has a feature built in that will digitally crop in the field of view. So you can max out in 28 and then use all that resolution to crop in all the way to 50 if you wanted to. Well, I think that's a great point, and I think in many ways it's a lot better than carrying around a zoom lens or carrying around multiple prime lenses that you have to swap. When you have less options, at least when it comes to street photography, you're fiddling with the camera less, whether that be a zoom lens, adjusting the focal length to find just the right focal length for that shot, or messing with the settings in the camera itself, or swapping lenses out. When you do all that, you're focused on the camera and the tool instead of focused on your environment. And for me, I already see the world in 40 millimeters. It allows me to keep a consistent feeling and style throughout all of my work. So as I wrap this video up, I just thought maybe it would be nice to actually share the exact 40 millimeter lens that I take with me, that I own and that I tend to use. This isn't by any means the best 40 millimeter or even a 40 millimeter that I would recommend. It has some weird quirks, but I freaking love this lens and I'm really happy with the purchase. And so I figured I would mention it. If you like the look of my photos and the specific feel and vibe that they have, then this is a huge reason for that, besides, some color grading stuff that I do. But basically, this is a Voigtlander 40 millimeter Ultron f2. It comes in a Nikon F mount. I believe you can get it in other mounts as well, but I bought it in the Nikon F mount simply because that's easy to adapt it to the Leica L mount, which is the native mount on my Panasonic S1H, which is my go-to full-frame digital camera. And when it's on the adapter, that is about how large it is. It's not super heavy, but the whole thing is metal construction, so it's got a good heft to it. But it is pretty small. It's a nice little compact lens. It would be even more compact if you didn't have to adapt it. It has beautiful optics. It's an f2, and I often do shoot it either wide open or near wide open with a really high shutter to allow me to expose properly for bright outdoor daytime environments. It's also really good in low light because of that f2, and allows you to get that shallower depth of field that's more akin to like a 50. One of the weird quirks about it though, and one of the main reasons I don't recommend it, is because the filter thread diameter is a really random size. I don't even remember what it is. It's really hard to find even just a standard ND filter that will fit this lens. It's a really quirky filter thread size and really hard to find just even NDs, let alone any kind of other filter you'd want to add on the front of the lens. But one thing that's really nice, as you can see, is the actual rotation distance of the focus ring is very long. So it allows you to be very, very accurate, even with very close focus. The bokeh of this lens is beautiful. It has that kind of swirly Petzval bokeh kind of look on the edges in full frame, which is really nice. So yeah, I thought that would be nice to kind of share my favorite 40 millimeter lens that I use and some of its interesting quirks, but also some of the reasons that I love it. So I think this is about a $400 lens, so not super expensive, especially in comparison to other full frame, fast still photography lenses out there, like Leica lenses and Zeiss lenses and things like that. So yeah, what do you guys think? What is your favorite focal length for street photography? Have you tried a 40 millimeter in your own kit? Or do you tend to go a little bit wider or a little bit more telephoto? Or do you kind of sit? For me, I'm a little bit right in the middle. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed some of the images I shared. I hope this video was a little bit entertaining and fun for you to watch. So let me know that you like this video with a like or a comment, or feel free to subscribe. I post videos like this every month, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.